bring in one of our experts. Clifford May is the president of Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he's going to help us make sense of all that's going on in the Middle East. Mr. May, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Wade. Good to be with you.
Well, all right, so I'm watching this interview. Did you see it, by the way?
I actually did not, I have to admit.
All right, well, let me give you the theme of his interview. We are leading from behind. Is the United States, is there such a thing? Are we leading from behind, or are we really just showing our own weakness or lack of determination abroad?
Well, yes. I mean, it's more what you're saying. We're not leading from behind. We're not leading at all. We're not managing the crises that are occurring. We're not shaping what is becoming a new Middle East, and it's a new Middle East that is on fire. With just in Syria alone, we're talking about 250,000 dead and millions of refugees. We're talking about Christians and other minorities being wiped out, eradicated in the Middle East. They've been there since the beginning of Christianity. They've been there from before the time there was anything called Islam. We have seen Vladimir Putin return to the Middle East, bring his military in, invade the space of Turkey, and Turkey is a member of NATO, and do so with impunity. We have the Islamic Republic of Iran, which the president has just made what I think is a terrible deal that they've already violated, and we're not seeing him even note the violations. Iran is not supposed to be developing sophisticated ballistic missiles under this agreement. And ballistic missiles are not for peaceful purposes. They're not for putting monkeys in space. They are for delivering weapons, and intercontinental ballistic missiles are for delivering nuclear weapons to targets on other continents like ours.
All right, so let's try to understand the playing field that's going on right now in the Middle East. You have Syria. You have Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian leader, who, a couple of years ago, President Obama said, hey, if this is a line in the sand. He continues to ignore al-Assad. Now you got Putin bolstering that alliance with al-Assad. What is that creating? What type of situation is Russia involved in Syria creating for not only that region, but also what are the ramifications for the United States?
Here's the way I would think about it, Wade, and it's the way this administration, among others, has refused to think about it. They want to talk about things like countering violent extremism, which is an entirely meaningless phrase. What we have right now, what we've had for a number of years, are ideologies rising up from the Middle East, from within what we have come to call the Islamic world. These ideologies are militant. These ideologies intend to seek the destruction of what they call infidels, of Christians and of Jews and others. They intend to defeat the United States. Now, they are wide ideologies, but they all have the same aims. And so you have the Islamic State, which used to be called ISIS or ISIL. They've renamed themselves because they have ambitions beyond the region ISIL or ISIS. Assumed their ambitions were in Syria or the Levant. Now they intend to be global, and they are in North Africa, and they are in Afghanistan, and they are establishing cells and links well beyond in Asia and other parts of Africa. You have the Islamic Republic of Iran, which intends to be the hegemon, the colossus, the boss of the Middle East, and having nuclear weapons will certainly help with that goal that they seek. And then you have groups like, the Islamic State broke off from al-Qaeda. Now, people think al-Qaeda was the beginning of this. It actually wasn't. In 1979, the revolution in Iran, I happen to have been there. That was the beginning of jihadism in the modern age, the idea that Muslims should be called upon to volunteer to fight and eventually destroy America, the West, Israel, all of that. Now, we need to understand that, and then you can say, okay, which ones of these people and movements and regimes that declare themselves our enemies, who do we need to take very seriously and in what order?
One of the most compelling parts of the 60 Minutes interview last night, Steve Croft asked a very poignant question. He said, is Putin mocking or challenging your leadership, Mr. President, because of his efforts to bolster Syria? is Putin challenging your leadership? And the president didn't want to answer that question. He kept challenging, the definition of leadership, but there's a fundamental question there. I mean, Putin is not our friend. Is he challenging Barack Obama's leadership by being in Syria? And if he is it because of President Obama's weak stances on fighting terrorism around the world?
Well, yes to all of the above. Look, there are three nations right now that are very intent on building empires, and they need to diminish American strength to do so. And on that basis, they have formed an alliance, and that would be Russia. Putin believes it is his job as a Russian leader, just as it is the job of commissars and czars, to expand the Russian Empire. He's doing that in Eastern Europe. He did it, obviously, by taking the Crimea, Ukraine. He took a slice out of Georgia. He has more plans, very likely, and he wants to make sure he has the port on the Mediterranean that Assad provides. He has also aligned himself with Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran also is establishing its empire and growing it in the Middle East. And China wants an empire, too. That's why they're taking reefs, making them into islands, putting military bases on them, and they will, in time, say these are our territorial waters, not international waters. America, stay out. Now, Putin is doing something else that's important. He is saying to people around the world, not least to various dictators, look, understand the difference. I stick by my allies come hell or high water. The Americans under Obama, but the Americans, he'll say, they'll always throw you under the bus. What do you want to do?
Well, there's a new player in the region as well. So ISIS, as you mentioned before, ISIS was born out of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda now finds itself trying to rebrand itself, if you will, in Syria. There's a new, maybe it's not new, there's another organization, another group called Al-Nusra.
Al-Nusra Front.
Yeah. So how does that complicating an even more difficult situation?
Well, it complicates it in a number of ways. For one thing, what we have called in the past Syria and Iraq are no longer quite the same. It is very unlikely, even if Putin and Assad succeed, that they will take back all of Syria. So you have these ungoverned lands, or these lands governed by very, very radical groups. They may decide to do various missions, including using these spaces to plan attacks against the United States or against Europe. Al-Qaeda, it's less in the news, but it is still expanding and rising and has more affiliates. I would say the Islamic State is doing the same, and of course Iran is expanding as well. And keep in mind that Bashar al-Assad is a client of Putin, but even more, he is a client of the Islamic Republic of Iran. He will do what they say, and it's important in terms of empire building for Iran that they control Iraq. We fought very hard for Iraq, and we sort of turned it over to them when we wrongly and mistakenly pulled all our troops out. We needed a residual presence in there, as we've had in Korea and Japan and Europe. He's taking Iraq. He wants at least parts of Syria. He wants Lebanon. He wants Gaza. He's trying for Yemen. He's not doing as well on that right now. I'm talking about the Iranians now. And the Iranians are doing all this with the backing, to an extent, of Putin, because, again, they have common interests, and the common interests are in diminishing the power of the United States, forcing the United States out of the Middle East and out of other areas of the world, too. Iran is also, keep in mind, infiltrating Latin America through Hezbollah very, very aggressively.
Is there any end in sight here? I mean, it was a year ago that we started these attacks on ISIL. We've made some progress, maybe at best, maybe a stalemate. Is there any progress in sight? I mean, how do we make real change in the region if, under the current program?
Well, first, I don't think we're making progress. I don't think it's a stalemate. I think you're going to see worse. You saw over the weekend the most lethal bombing in Turkey's history. We don't have a claim of responsibility, but I think it was probably the Islamic State, and they are in Turkey right now, and they intend to do more in Turkey. We need to have a strategy to defeat Islamism, jihadism, the various ideologies that proclaim themselves our enemies. If you have enemies, you need to think what to do about it. If you're living in a neighborhood and your neighbors want to kill you, you better think about what your strategy is going to be to protect your family and maybe to do something about those. We're not doing that now. There is no strategic thinking going on. the president gets on TV, as you say, and says all's well. When it's not, he is presiding over a terrible genocide and a terrible explosion and implosion in the Middle East. Nothing is being done about any of that, and I don't think anything will be done. I think he's going to run out the clock saying, everything's fine, I don't know what you're talking about. The next president is going to have a lot of damage that he'll need to repair.
Right. Well, or even if he doesn't say everything is fine, he's going to say, well, we're on the right track. Give my plan time, enough time, and we'll see some progress. But
he has no plan. There is no plan. There's
no plan. And what he admitted last night in the interview that these attacks, he never believed they were going to be effective. Never believed they were going to be effective. So he's not surprised that they're not effective. And a lot of Republicans were saying from the very beginning there had to be some military presence, some type of boots on the ground if you're going to make real change in the region. That was off the table from the very beginning from this president, and instead he backed a plan that apparently he never believed in. To me, that sends a horrible message to our allies in the region.
Look, we are in a situation that you never want to be in, which is that our enemies don't fear us and our allies do. No great power should be in that situation. We should be considered by anybody in the world to be the best friends you can have and the worst enemies you can have. It is upside down right now under an administration that has no plans, has no strategy, and doesn't understand the magnitude of what's happening and has given to our enemies tremendous boosts. Look, if I had said to you on a radio show back in, say, October of 2001, here's my prediction for the future. We will, within 15 years, have a president who is giving billions of dollars to the leading terrorist supporters in the world and giving them a path to nuclear weapons and overlooking the fact that they're getting, as well, more conventional weapons and ballistic missiles, and will not be terribly concerned about terrorist groups taking over huge portions of the Middle East. You'd say, that's not possible. We've had a wake-up call. We'll never have a president who will do the things you describe. What I've just described is exactly what is happening right now.
Yeah, welcome to the modern world under Democratic rule. Clifford May, I thank you so much for your time today. He's the president and founder of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thanks for bringing some clarity in an often very confusing and complex issue. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.